Hello, everyone, and welcome to my rural development series. I will be talking on the concept rural development and its sub topics. I will be explaining it in details. Today, we'll be talking about the concept rural and the characteristics of rural societies. So, at the end of today's session, our expectation is that everyone should be able to discuss the concept of rural as well as the three types of criteria generally used to define rural societies, itemize various demographic criteria and various concepts to distinguish rural from urban. So, as a way of introduction, a rural community is defined as a remote place. Is defined as a remote place. We can also say a concept rural is a modern construct that gains significance with the emergence of urban and modern societies. While various rural conditions have existed throughout the history or throughout the history of man, it became a social and cultural concern in modern times. Ruralness, in quotes, like we like to say, is a multifaceted concept that can be viewed from various perspectives, and rural conditions and communities exhibit significant diversity that distinguishes them from one another. Okay, recent research has revealed that certain characteristics traditionally associated with rural society, such as close personal primary group relationship, can also be found in urban areas. The term rural is personally defined empirically by low population density. So when you hear the word rural, it simply tells you that that place is likely to have a low population density and small settlements. But there is significant variability in the operational criteria used to distinguish rural from urban regions. Also, we can also say there's a little consensus, all right? Some scholars are in agreement concerning this. There's a little consensus on the qualitative attributes that differentiate rural communities or societies from urban ones. The concept of rural has been defined using both empirical and qualitative attributes as well as a combination of both, presenting methodology or methodological and theoretical challenges akin to those encountered in defined urban and other constructed types. When discussing rural issues, it's essential to avoid stereotypes, as the concept of rural carries multiple meanings depending on its social historical context. Beyond its geographical aspect, it encompasses social, economic, cultural, political, and demographic dimensions, which are often burdened with negative connotations compared to urban areas. It is often viewed as inferior. Rural areas are often viewed as inferior, or sometimes that something, or they view them as something that needs preservation or development. Clarifying the concept of rural is critical for sociological analysis to generate valid generalization, and recent attention has focused on identifying the minimum and essential criteria for defining rural society in the last decade. Now, there are general criteria to define rural society. The first is the number of inhabitants. The second is the ratio of inhabitants to open land. And then the third is the type of economic activities in the rural society. Rural society typically have such economic activities as agriculture, fishing, food production, and exploitation of raw materials. One problem that one faces is that governments do not use the same statistical criteria for rural and urban population. For instance, in Japan, any cluster of fewer than 30,000 people is considered to be rural. Okay, in some places, rural is just 200 persons. In some places, below 30,000 is rural. So you see, the definition is not stable at all. Now, there are various demographic criteria and various concepts to distinguish rural from urban. One of it is based on densely and sparsely populated area. We can also differentiate or distinguish rural from urban based on demographics. When we say demographics, we mean population type, population size, structure of the society, the distribution of population in such a place, birth rate. Is the place having high birth rate, low birth rate? Well, in the rural areas, we have high birth rate. In urban areas, we have low birth rate. Where in the urban area, the average couple wants to have two or three children. In the urban areas, you have people having up to 10 children, eight children, some 12, some 15. So you see, this is another criteria for distinguishing urban from rural, the demographic um, classifications like birth rate, death rate, migration pattern, age distribution, other demographic factors are used. Now, another distinguishing factor is based on economic structure and level of technology applied in the settlement, culture and educational structure, and service functions and lifestyle. Now, in the rural area, the economy is not as buoyant as that of the urban area. Level of technology applied in the urban areas are more than what is applied in the rural area. So if you see a place that is predominantly technologically inclined, it's likely to be urban. Then we talk of culture and education, structures and other service functions and lifestyle. The lifestyle, obviously, in the urban area is definitely higher in its economic burden on the people in the urban area than in the rural area. Okay, now we are still differentiating. Another distinguishing factor that differentiates rural areas from urban area is the absence of industry, medical institutions, and research centers. These are indication that such a place is rural. Also, educational opportunities offered within a settlement. Does that the educational opportunity, does it offer opportunity of higher education? Does it offer opportunity for college? Does it offer opportunity for university? It all depends. Now, if it is, then it's likely to be urban or semi-rural. But rural areas don't have much of those things, given our own criteria down here in Nigeria. Also, as a consequence of economic and educational structures we just listed above, the composition and demand for labor vary between rural and urban areas. Yet another criteria would be the lifestyle, how people live within the environment. Rural societies were typified with their strong adherence to farming and fishing and marked with a high regard for intimacy and tradition. This is in contrast with urban areas, which is characterized by impersonal bureaucracy, rationalized specialization, and mechanization. All right. Now, what are the characteristics of a rural society? From all that we have discussed so far, you can easily name a bit of them on your palm. One, one critical characteristic of the rural society is the relatively few people in such places. Okay, relatively few people in such places. Number two, dependence on natural resources. Rural societies are highly dependent on natural resources. Number three, limited educational opportunities after secondary school. Number four, limited job demand and opportunities for skilled and educated labor. Then number five, absence of urban commodities such as restaurants, theaters, galleries, cinemas, and so on. Okay, that's about it for today. Now you have you know what a rural society is and its characteristic. Attempt defining the concept of rural in your own words, as well as enumerate its characteristics. Thank you for listening as I look forward to seeing you in my next class.